Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor. And thank you for that rousing welcome. You may be seated. Good morning, Minister of State for National Development and Manpower, Brigadier General Tan Chuan Jin, Mr. Poon Hong Yoon, CEO, National Parks Board, Professor Paul Matsudara, Head Department of Biological Sciences, and welcome everybody to the third Biodiversity of Singapore Symposium, jointly organized by NParks and NUS. We have a very exciting day lined up for you with a series of talks on forests, freshwater, and marine habitats of Singapore. And we also have more than 350 participants and 40 posters. So I'm sure there'll be lots of discussions, albeit nerdy ones, over some very stimulating topics on biodiversity. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Siva to come forward and give an overview of the symposium. Siva?
Hi, good morning everyone. We expect 400 people, probably 200 haven't woken up yet, but they'll come. And you know, I'm really pleased to welcome you to LT27. This is where I attended chemistry classes as a first year student in 1987. So this is next generation, I know, but And in this LT there was a very irreverent man. His name was Lee Siu-yin. He was a chemistry professor, and he would scornfully laugh at us as we struggled with quantum mechanics and called us feeble-minded. Those days are obviously over. We can't do such things. But later on he became the dean, and he wandered around to search the ground and figure out what was this in Faculty of Science that he needed to know about. And he discovered the museum. It was then called a reference collection. And he said, why doesn't anyone know about this? And the curator said, but you never came. So then he said, we'll change the name, Raffles Museum of Biodiversity Research. Dragged in Peter Ng. Peter Ng dragged me in. And in 2014, we're now going to have a new museum. So the importance of... And Sui Hee will provide an update of that during the special session. So the importance of moving around, interacting, getting to know what each other is up to is very important. And that was the motivation behind the first symposium in 2003. That was, just shortly after Chek Jawa, there was an explosion of excitement and interest. We did 2 days, 300 people, and everyone got to know each other. So about 2 months ago, Linda Goh and Lim Wei Ling, can you put your hands? These are two the long-suffering souls from NParks. So Linda's in charge of the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plan, and one of its goals is to get people to connect. There are 5 goals. She'll talk about it during special sessions. And she said, it's been a long time. So much has happened. And in the 8 years since that first major symposium, yes, a lot of things have happened. There's been an explosion of freshwater research. I mean, freshwater is difficult to find in Singapore, right? It's often viewed as a dengue threat, so we try to drain it and oil it. But it's there, and a lot of people are doing research now. And there was the blue plan. I think the first one probably was put in the paper shredder the moment it was submitted. But this second one, the minister held it up above his head and said, this is the kind of feedback we want to see from the public. My jaw was open, so I forgot to video that moment. This was in 2009, and then we now have the comprehensive marine biodiversity survey. So all these things have happened, but we hardly really know what's going on. So we decided, let's get everyone together again and interact. So the interaction during the symposium is really important. There are 2 teas lasting an hour, so that we don't have to drag you in while you're at the point of making an important breakthrough with somebody and it's time to go. So the food is good. NParks has vetted the caterer to ensure that they are green. Yes, we want to reduce plastic and we want to reduce waste. It's a very important issue during the symposium. Why? Because it's fueled by people from the next generation. Right? These are younger people. It didn't happen at the onset. We looked through the list and my God, they're rather young. And so we said the bar is at 35. It later got pushed to 40. And then since our guest of honor is 42, we said, and he's next generation. So our next generation is 42 or below, with a few apologies from Ria and myself. So we have 21 speakers lined up in 3 sessions. In freshwater, you'll see people are going to talk about microbes, invertebrates and vertebrates. In the marine session, which is probably the most mature since the explosion after Chek Jawa, you find out that researchers are now using community to get involved in doing big-scale research. And there will be a couple of in-depth studies from coral reef and mangrove. The terrestrial environment is really interesting because you have talk about the eco-link, reconnecting 2 forest patches, and then the urge to push people to go outside and interact. And then finally, you have people talking about botany and zoology. These are 2 subjects in NUS that nearly went extinct during some time. But now we are seeing a resurgence. So that's really great. So this getting to know each other, why is it so important? Because everything is not fine. Most of the time, because we are dealing with depressive documentaries, we try to go out and exhort people that you do have biodiversity out there. There are solid things being done. If you go to most cities in the region, you're not going to find a green cover like the ones we have. But if we keep talking about the positive messages because we're trying to rouse people up to get involved, because many of them said there's nothing in Singapore. But internally within the community, as we get to know each other, we can tackle a few difficult questions like, is Bukit Timah being pounded to death? Should we actually close the reserve off? This is a really tough question, right? Then we see conflict with animals, be it civets or long-tailed macaques. These mirror what's going on with stray cats in HDB, where people have a disconnect and they're actually frightened of cats on the table and they might not approach. So then one of the solutions appears to be to kill, but it turns out it's originating from 4% of the public. But these 4% are really vocal, and we are affected by these views perhaps a bit too much. We also have this urge to increase our biodiversity. We see otters along the edge of the coast, but we want it in the reservoir. Is the solution to grab a bunch of animals from the zoo and to dump it in the reservoir? That is, of course, very fascinating. But we need to explore why they are missing from our reservoirs in the first place. And the way to go would probably be habitat remediation. The UK did it, but it took them 2 decades. Do we have the patience in such a fast-paced society that we can facilitate the return of nature and not try to manipulate the precious reserves that we have left? Another difficult question is, when we take students out to Bukit Timah and we ask who has been here before, it's the exchange student that puts up his hand rather enthusiastically. And then I mimic the calls of a couple of birds like kingfishers and red jungle fowl, and they've not heard it. They don't believe you can see even Calotis versicolor, the changeable lizard. They've not seen it before. So we have urban citizens who don't realize nature is under their noses, and I realize now as they have their iPhones on the bus, I shouldn't say they, myself included, will miss the journey and reach the destination and not realize it's around them. And so in university we face this challenge as we manage to salvage back environmental studies. Can our youth remain as disconnected as they are? Are we doing enough? So in this symposium, the people who come and interact and find out about what each of us are doing, we have a responsibility as a community. It's not to ask the government what you can do. Amongst us, we have to ask, what can we do as individuals? What can we do as groups? And how can we enhance what we've been doing so far? I decided to choose a simple analogy. NUS is a pretty bare space. Students have tried they did try for 2 years to get trees planted. And they were thwarted at every move. Every suggestion they came, there was a counter suggestion. So in the end, they were given permission to plant trees at the back of campus. And the students said, we are a pro-development campus. And then shortly after that, one elder statesman drove through NUS and he asked, why is this place so bare? And now if you go to University Hall, you see a veritable forest. Some people in NParks are laughing because they supplied the trees. So will we stay green? We can't take it for granted. I still remember Tan Wee Kiat, he came to NUS and he said, the challenge to plant a tree was a battle. We had to fight off every other agency who wanted to widen the road, extend the flat to the edge of the road, and we can't take it for granted, and NParks can't do it alone. So we here have to stand with them, to wrestle with them sometimes, but to also provide them the encouragement and the support so that we can all see a green environment in Singapore in years to come. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Siva, for that timely reminder. We'd like to welcome our guest of honor, MOS Tan, to deliver his opening address. MOS, please.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here. Actually, I spent a lot of time in the environment, although in a very different capacity previously. Half the time we were out training, mostly walking in the forest at night, tripping over the roots, crossing all the drains, the canals, and then usually we are late because we got lost. And we're supposed to attack by 6, by dawn, and usually became a morning attack. And you're rushing from point to point, and you don't really spend the time. Sometimes we do. I mean, in the daytime when you're moving, and then you find, oh, there's a durian tree, then you regret, done. Must come back here. And apparently, it's quite good. I've never tasted any of the durians we find in the Lim Chu Kang area, but it's supposed to be quite good. But I think, but one of the things, and I've come to realize, I mean, and one of the great things about this portfolio in MND is really, I mean, the work that NParks is doing, and I think also URA. In terms of the whole urban planning and how we try to manage the scarce resource we have. And one of the things that I've come to learn that one of the benefits of having MINDEF, having quite a large bit of land, is that actually there are a lot of stuff that's preserved because it's MINDEF land and nobody goes there. And then when we trample around, I mean, we have, after a while, you have fairly standard routes from whether you attack from north to south, south to north. I mean, Singapore is only that big. I mean, those of you who have done your NS will know, and that route to get to attack Lim Chu Kang Hill and so on and so forth, and the rest of it we don't really trample over, as we become a lot more mechanized. I think a lot of the routes we are using the roads, so we find that the place has overgrown quite considerably every time you go back. But I think what it means is that actually a lot of the areas are quite well preserved, and I understand there's a lot of biodiversity in the MINDEF area. So I think there is some merit in keeping the military component of things. But I think it's one of the things that I think it's important to highlight is, I think what Siva mentioned, I think is how do we work together on this. I think today we all feel this strong sense of activism. Everything, Facebook movement, let's go and do this, meet at this Starbucks cafe, or wear black, or wear whatever. I'm not sure. Well, I mean, that's something that, I mean, we're all free to do. I suppose it's exciting. But I think the partnership that NParks have forged, I think, with a lot of you here today, I think it's a very good testimony of how I think that whole active citizenry can work very well in the context of Singapore. I'm not sure whether this necessarily applies to everything we do, but I think certainly the way we are going forward, whether on the railway corridor project, the city in the garden, with the animal welfare issues, certainly on my part and MOM as well, dealing with foreign domestic workers as well. Some of these things we are working together with the different NGOs, a lot further upstream, with a lot of the different stakeholders. where the policy really, I also don't really know what the end conclusion is exactly going to be, but I think to start that process early so that all of you can play a part to shape it. But we also do live in a world where I think there are difficult choices. I know that that's the kind of, there they go again, is it, government, difficult trade-offs, hard choices. But it's important to have a worldview about whether those choices and those trade-offs have to be made. Because, I remember that during the railway corridor, and someone posted on Facebook about how, we should learn from Spain. You got, I don't know how many thousand kilometers of railway line and how they've converted it. If I have thousands of railway line, no problem. Thousands of kilometers of railway line, but I only have this 27 kilometers, I'm going to figure out what to do with it, and that's all we have, and you run across the whole spine of it. But I think it's the way going. I mean, it's early days. I think people are expecting answers now, but I don't think the answers should be provided now because it takes time, I think, to build up the interest and awareness. And I think it's important for people to chip in to give their perspective because it paints a more complete picture. We will never be able to accede to everyone's desires. Just as I'm sure in our work together on this, we won't be able to. But I think we can go a lot further, I think, working together than if we were all separate. Because I think the government will not be a subject matter expert in this. And parks, I think, have built up a very good background, a very good level of expertise. But I think that many of you here also with very niche interests, which I think it's important to bring to bear. Because when we are aware of it and we think, hey, that makes sense, so why can't we incorporate it in? So the moments that you have where whichever minister hold up and your mouth drop, those moments will still be there. And I think it comes from, tapping on the full range of knowledge and wisdom that I think society has. And I think that extends not just in the green areas, but I think across many different issues. Some issues less so, perhaps because a bit more sensitive in different areas, whether from a security perspective or from a market perspective. But I think there are many areas that we're going forward, this whole idea of engagement and working together with society at large. I mean, it's not about us and them or us and you, but I think really when you have a very small space, we all really need to figure out how best to manage it. I mean, from our perspective, we do need to manage those difficult choices because going forward, as I look at the 2055 development plan, it is very challenging. And those are realities because even as we're not reproducing enough, but we are still growing, nonetheless. And there's only that much reclamation you're able to do. So within that finite space, we have to make those decisions. But I think we are very committed to preserving, and certainly I think Singapore is much greener today than it was before. Can we marry up development and conservation at the same time? I think there are good examples of how conservation development can happen. I mean, Kentridge, here with the whole Henderson Wave and all that. Some would prefer that it's kept totally pristine. But I think we've brought Singaporeans a lot closer to nature and understanding and to appreciate a lot of these things which they might not have done before. And as a result, a greater awareness. I think that's a good thing. And that's something we need to preserve. Because our identity is not centered just on your history, what happened in 1965, 1959, the Second World War and so on. Our history is also very much about our biodiversity, the fauna, flora, the animals that were living here way before we came. All that makes up a sense of what it means to be Singaporean. And I think it's really important to embrace that and I think to bring it on board and to preserve as much of it as we can. And I think Singapore is a very good testimony of how a city can preserve. Because we are very unlike many other countries in the world and many other cities because they have a hinterland so they can get rid of a lot of things and they don't have to bother. But, it's not to worry because there's a suburb area where it's probably a better place to preserve all this. But we are not like them. We don't have a hinterland to throw everything else to. We have to balance all this within this space, provide all the, so that we reduce the queues for all the young couples. So I've got to build new HDB flats. And where do I build new HDB flats? I've got to find land somewhere. And all those land will have grass and trees. And there'll be animals and fauna and flora that will be in those plots of land. So I got to build those new HDB flats. So where do I find those plots of land? There's actually still a lot of land in Singapore, but I think we've preserved a lot of it. But there are other plots that, perhaps we need to move on. And that's I think, the space that we all operate in. So I think we need to stay off development where we can, and some invariably perhaps will have to be developed at some point. Maybe there'll be progress in technology or other areas that someone sell us an island somewhere. Okay, that solves a lot of issues. I don't think that's going to happen, but we can always live in hope. Then that will save you, perhaps some plots of land somewhere. But let's take each step as we go along, and I think let's see how best to carve out that common space. And I think to work together on that. So now back to the formal speech. So I'm supposed to go through this. Okay. Well, good morning. I'm supposed to be encouraged to see many of you here on Saturday, and I am. I think to exchange knowledge and explore collaborations in biodiversity, research, education. I think it's encouraging, and I think many of us would like to see more people being committed. And it's a bit schizophrenic, because, as we grow more people interested in the green issues, it means that more people are going to challenge the government. And of course, we have our own NParks colleagues as well. But I think that's necessary, because, like I said, we don't monopolize wisdom. I think all of us have to occupy our own space. And I think it's important to develop that active citizenship. I think not just in this area, but in other areas where people are passionate about it. And those tensions are inevitable, but I think they're necessary. And I think it's a useful forum, I think, for people to get together, to talk, encourage each other. And I think as Siva pointed out, it's very important to look at the positive message. There are a lot of very positive things. I think we are sometimes very negative. We're very critical. As you always say, I always copy Kabu. A lot of issues, a lot of angst. But yes, there are things that I think we can grumble about, that we are unhappy about. But there's also a lot of, I don't know whether as a minister I can say things like that, but never mind. But there are a lot of positive steps that have been taken. And I think sometimes focusing on the positive has a lot of effect in terms of inspiring people. That actually there is a lot of possibilities. And let's work toward those things, rather than build up a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger and all that, and then end up creating a lot of friction, where I think we end up spending a lot of time battling over whether on the online media or on the mainstream media, and it doesn't always necessarily help. But I think forums like this is useful, because I think we can see where we have gone, and I think we can go a lot further. And I think the whole vision, I think that PM articulated at the National Day rally on the City and Garden is a very significant one. I think we are committing a lot of effort, assuming the commitment will remain there. I think a lot of effort will be put in, I think, to continue to green Singapore even further. The developments, I think, with PUB, with all the canals, converting it into waterways, bringing back perhaps more fishes and whatever that we can bring back into the canals, rather than just concrete canals that are necessary to regulate the waters and so on, but I think to beautify it in the same way as the efforts of the parks and so on, and indeed also to preserve whatever we have in the reserves. And the vision isn't, I think, about just infrastructure to enhance the greenery. I think some of us have a lot of interest in it for its own sake, and I think that's a good thing as well. But from my perspective, I think it's really about always remembering what does it mean for our people, the society that we want to build in the community. And I think it's about building a very vibrant urban ecosystem and how you connect communities. It's where people go out to live, to play, to meet others. It's a social space where we enjoy not only nature but the interaction with others. And I think that's important for a very dense city like Singapore. I mean, we are nowhere near Hong Kong. I'm not sure whether, I don't think we want to go to that level of density, but it will get denser, right? Flats are getting higher, closer space. They're not as big as before because of constraints, but our living space cannot be constrained by the four walls. And I think we need to move out, and we need to own that environment, which is why keeping it clean of litter and all that is an important habit to cultivate. But it's about that common space that all of us share. And like I said earlier, it's about our history as well. and our natural heritage, which I think we do need to work very hard at preserving. And I think to realize this vision of a city in a garden, I think all of us need to play a part. I think to co-create this space, to chip in your... Is it synchronized? It's not supposed to, so never mind. So we are all supposed to chip in, give your however many cents worth, and I think it's important for us to listen and see how best to incorporate it in ways that make sense. And I think we need to keep this sustained, which is why the next generation, which is not just 42 and under, but I think really across it transcends ages, right? It transcends nationalities, and I think it's important for all of us to play that role. And don't ever underestimate the difference that everyone can make. I think in all your own little space, all of you have families, your children, your extended families. If you can make an impact, bring them out, let them take a look, I think there's a great deal of difference all of us here today can already make with your immediate sphere of influence. Don't always just look at, what to do, societies like that, governments like this. Do something about it. You'll be surprised how much actually we can do. If everybody is prepared to put in the time and effort, a great deal of stuff can be done. But sometimes we devolve that personal responsibility and blame it on someone else, but when we in our own space can do something. And I think the green movement and how we have tried to preserve our environment is a very good testimony of how I think different individuals over time have made the difference. And you have seen how that has grown. And I think we can continue to build on that. So I think this interest has built up. I think NParks, have also put in considerable effort. I think a very comprehensive marine biodiversity survey. The EcoLink, which we recently launched in the Bukit Timah Expressway, and then the Rail Corridor Project. I think it's another one that's quite exciting because it spans through a whole different parts of Singapore, north to south, and I think that's something that over time been able to meet many people, interest groups. I've learned a lot about how the butterflies, what kind of plants, and so now with that consciousness in mind, how do we maintain some form of green belt that runs from north and maybe famous last words, I shouldn't commit things before it's all too clear, but I do actually think that we can maintain something significant along that whole stretch, and to have some contiguous stretch of some form. And there are interesting ideas being thrown forward by architectural students about how the green isn't just purely just your trees there, but even on the top of the buildings, to replicate your tall trees, you have a 2, 3, 4-story buildings, but your trees on top of that, not quite the same, but provides at least a platform for the small birds that need to flit from tree to tree and to make their way from this reserve to the other reserve. Okay, so I learned quite a lot of things as a result of that, and ensure some of this biodiversity spreads across the board. And green, not just purely in the natural environment, but ecologically sound, and that's something we're placing a lot of emphasis on in the buildings. So could that be something that we expect most buildings, or all buildings, I don't know about all, but certainly most perhaps along that belt to be developed in that way? I think it's quite possible. So I think it's very apt that I think this symposium is targeted at the next generation. I'll suggest that it also should be targeted at this generation as well, because this generation can still do a lot. And I think it's not just for the young. I think, like I said, it does really transcend ages. And I think this where it's useful to cite the examples. I think Lim Wei Ling, an NUS biology graduate, right, that's her. I'm assuming that's okay. There, okay, right. She's helped to organize the public walks to Chek Jawa, and I think some years ago she learned that the reclamation at Chek Jawa could be deferred, so we can make U-turns as well, huh? Not often, but it happens. And her passion in conserving the precious flora, fauna, I think motivated her to return from overseas studies to join NParks. And I think now she's working as a conservationist in the NParks Biodiversity Center, and has made a tremendous effort to conservation efforts. And I think along with those many people as well who have been championing, back then, I can't remember when was it, but I remember reading the papers about Chek Jawa and all that, and you see the fruits of your labor today. And I think that's something all of you should be proud of. And Marcus Chua, who is one of the speakers today as well as a postgrad student at NUS researching the ecology of the leopard cat, catchment forests and the offshore islands. And I think he also actively mentors young NUS students on biodiversity research issues. And I think through his research, he has confirmed sightings of the greater mouse deer at Pulau Ubin after making numerous night surveys on the island, which is quite significant because the animal hasn't been seen in the past 80 years. It's probably been there in the past 80 years, just nobody has seen it. I say I've walked our forest quite often. I think the only animals I see are ourselves are tramping from point to point. But I think this kind of passion that they show, I think exemplifies the kind of qualities we hope to see from Singaporeans. I think in many areas, and I think we do look forward to more Singaporeans showing that same level of commitment, because I think with more people committed and passionate in terms of their fight to preserve some of these things, I think we will definitely go a lot further in maintaining this. And I think to encourage more people to appreciate all this, I think pleased to also announce that NParks is also launching a Community in Nature program. I think we're all familiar with the Community in Bloom or the CIB program, and I think this has helped to nurture 400 gardening groups island-wide. And I think similarly through the Community in Nature program, NParks hopes to grow a network of individuals and organizations with interest in conserving nature and biodiversity in Singapore. So I encourage all of you, I don't think if you're here this morning, I don't think I need to encourage you, but go and encourage others to participate in this CIN program. I think together with your families and friends, I think it's an opportunity to reconnect with nature and bring in a wide range of activities, art, photography, and bird watching, so on and so forth. And I think it will certainly enrich the lives of our Singaporeans, especially the young Singaporeans who are just spending time at gaming parlors and playing their Xbox and stuff. Get them out of the house, go and walk, get them a lot healthier and ready for national service. I mean, they're multi-pronged, there's many benefits in all this effort. So, okay, I need to conclude. So, anyway, let me conclude by reiterating that the City in a Garden vision is about co-creation. And I think that's an important concept. And I think the way going forward, really co-creation in many, many areas that we hope to see. And about a quality living environment for not only ourselves, but I think importantly for future generations. And I think we can make it happen. So I believe that today's symposium will facilitate, I think, useful sharing and exchange of insights and ideas. And I think important not just to confine it here, but really take it out and inspire the rest of the Singaporeans to believe in the things that you do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, MOS. I think we can all agree that it was a very heartening speech, both the impromptu and the official. Can we give it a little round of applause? Okay, so now on to more, I was going to say fun, but it was very fun as well. Siva will now be presenting some awards, Symposium Awards. These are new, and I'll let him tell you a bit more about it.
Hi, good morning everyone once again. Minister, that was great. I like the way he completely ignored his speech, and then Maxine was like, this is a coordinated PowerPoint. What do I press? So, okay, she's a grad student, she can cope with. So at the first symposium, we conceived this idea that we want to express our gratitude to certain individuals, and we gave out symposium awards to Lady McNeese and Real Time and Chua Kiam as an expression of gratitude from the community towards individuals. This year happens to be the 20th anniversary of the International Coastal Cleanup in Singapore. It's a very low profile sort of environmental program, but it's the largest and the oldest in Singapore. And this year we've decided to come out from hiding to expose them, because there are numerous people who have gone out and done work for an impressive number of years. It's no flash in the pan, they do it quietly and dedicatedly, and we want to acknowledge them. This is Professor Murphy, who got me involved in mangrove. I just went to help him carry things and never left. And this is Kranji. This was Kranji, nothing could grow. It is now Kranji Nature Trail. Sungai Buloh is actually developing as part of their working master plan. So it's an incredible transformation. And in those days we said, there are these people who tackle trash, maybe they should come here and give it a shot. Well, they did. And this program started in the US in 86. They collect, categorize and count. They don't just remove, because they want to ship their information back and say, what can we do about it, to governments, to United Nations, as well as to the public. So everyone uses the same data card. As the sun rises from New Zealand all the way to the United States, people are nowadays twittering about how they are waking up early morning to go to the shores. So it's part of a large community, a global community. And in Singapore, it's in its 20th year. And now things are not so much fun. There's a bridge. But in the old days, we could get really dirty in some of these places. We continually search for shorelines in Singapore. We are really small, so we actually have to manage who goes where, and we run out of beach. Can you imagine that? Everyone wants to go and participate. So the only places we don't go, either there's been a reservoir or it's army land, but we will penetrate army ground. I think they actually are interested in allowing us in, and MParks will facilitate with that. So this was where I started, and this lady was the founder. Kate Tuma is here today, and this is the railway, which all of us are now familiar with. So this photo is now very valuable. 1997, and you can see this is one of the co-organizers, Linda Goh, who's so exhausted and she's eating. She came there and then later brought the program to Sungai Buloh, and then it's matured. It's part of their year plan now, so it happens almost without effort. And this is my biology teacher. So we brought everyone. Just now the minister exhorted us to grab the people around us and go and do something. We grabbed them and got them soaked. This was a time when we didn't have to tell them you're going to get wet when you come up. Now, of course, they'll drown, I guess. This is a living room built up from things that we find along the coast. We always sensitively sort of say the tide brings things in without really pointing fingers. There's a shoreline contribution and there's a contribution from the sea. So it started out as living room, became bedroom and the garage as well. It's wonderful when we meet these people later on in life. So this girl helping me with data is now a PhD student in Zurich, and she's working on community conservation. Her name is Janice Lee. This little bitsy thing here, undergrad at the time, is now a lecturer in environmental biology. She'll be one of the people leading you to visit the posters minister along with Wei Ling. And we went to nearby areas because we have exchange students or people who come from these countries, and they say, I want to do something, they go back. The one in Penang is particularly funny because Alison Wee, who's the chair, one of the chairs for Marine, she went back and the state government came and this is really great. It's become this great statewide thing and there are thousands of people. They aren't really filling in the data card properly, but we said, never mind. It's a tsunami of enthusiasm, don't get in the way. And they even banned plastic bags for 3 days, Monday to Wednesday, in their urge to clean up Penang. So it's amazing what enthusiasm can infect others. The data goes up to international plans, and this is brought to United Nations by Ocean Conservancy because the problem is universal. What you see in Singapore is often a petri dish for what's happening in cities around the world. So it's a great training ground. I mean, it's not funny. There's microplastics permanently floating in the Pacific. Now they realize there's North and South and Pacific and Atlantic. And the source and the origin is single-use plastic. So this is 25 years from around the world. And you can see these are common everyday items. And in Singapore, the profile is similar. So this was last year's data. And shoreline and recreational is a big contributor. This is mainly styrofoam, which debris of local concern sometimes is impermeable from sands on the beach. It's incredible. So we do go out and educate people about it. Plastic is both the blessing and the curse. It's funny because Singapore in the 60s, as we went to high-rise living, we had to educate people to use plastic bags as they throw rubbish into their chute. So high-density housing still needs its plastic bags. We just need to be sensible about how we use it. And statements emerge because of the data generated day after day. And this was particularly fascinating because primary school kids are feeling this. I mean, I only learned about it way after my first degree. They are learning about it in primary school now. But is it just a community that's struggling to do this? Scientists responded, this is journal cover, Philosophical Transactions of the Linnean Society, and this is journal cover. Every article inside dealt with this issue of plastic. There's now ocean-going expeditions to try to come to terms with it. How long does it degrade? Is it entering the food chain? What sort of bioaccumulation is there? We have environmental engineers studying our coastline as well. And in Singapore, it's so easy for this to become urgent. This is a Macau landfill. As it fills, it's not being filled with our trash, it's being filled with the ash of our trash. And we can now see it from Kentridge Park. So it's a poignant story. We had to destroy mangrove and coral reefs to build this. How long can we make this last? And NE is quite concerned about this. So they tell you the more you recycle, the longer this lasts. So there's a direct link between our trash and marine conservation. So it's a small group that does this with a lot of help from Google Docs. If not, we would all probably not be able to cope. And we have been inspired by the contributions and actions of individuals and groups that have persisted. You know, in a day when there's a lot of flash in the pan activity, you meet a group of students who say, oh, we really want to do this. And then 6 months later, after project submission, they've disappeared. And you're wondering, wait, didn't you say you're going to change the world? Where did you go? No, it was a school project. But here you have people who have persisted. You can see in yellow there are individuals involved with those groups. But the ones without individual names, the organization has been able to transfer the value of the experience. And they've persisted from between 7 to 20 years. And we are really happy that they found their passion in the mud, on the beaches, and they continue to help to protect our marine shores and translate those lessons back into daily living. So, Minister, you know we are quite persistent in trying to get you down here. You're at a stage where he's trying to study the ground, so he's talking to all kind of groups. Why did we try to drag you down so much? Because of something you said. You see, you block and you get into trouble. So this is people are trying to make a difference. I mean, all we're going to give you guys, the awardees, is a certificate, but we thought it would be pretty special if you get a handshake from this young man who's trying to make a difference. And we are really glad you came, and we'd like to invite them up now to get their certificate. So, Minister, would you like to take the stage again? Thank you very much. And we welcome the stage now Mr. Kwa Yi Wen from Earthlink NTU. Okay, Earthlink used to come to the beaches. Now we've put them into Pandan Mangrove. Next, we have Haising Catholic, Anthony Tan. When I first met Haising, it was in the presence of a nun who is quite determined about the environment. So Haising has kept this up for a long time. Now we have Oscar Ng, who leads Oscar and Friends. So this is a powerful lady who is able to recruit friends, and they have been tackling Chek Jawa now for 9 years. Right? No mean feat. And next, I'm really glad to invite environmental engineering student Algernon from represents NUS. They have a tradition of seniors handing it down to juniors, and it's happened for 9 years now. Next, we have Waterways Watch Society Eugene Heng, an old friend who, after the damming of Singapore River, is still working at the reservoirs, and they run education programs for students. Next, Nanyang Polytechnic Geo Council, Un Jin Neng. Nanyang Poly has been involved for 11 years. Generations ago, they helped write the guidelines, which we still use today. And we next have Jack Chong from Woodlands Ring Secondary. Jack joined us at Kranji in 2001, then went out to Loyang Mangroves and has kept it up ever since. I might just add that Jack actually is President's Award for Teachers, highest accolade you can receive as a teacher, in charge of pastoral care. Now if you're chatting up a girl from Raffles Girls Secondary, you can ask her, did you do the International Coastal Cleanup? And they've been at it for 20 years, so you will be able to start a conversation. Sulastri Anis, please come forward. And now Singapore American School, this is the high school represented by Martha Bagan. And the Singapore American School is traditionally given the toughest spot because their student will cover the area like locusts. And in some of our cleanups at Kranji, 3.5 tons in 90 minutes along with other groups. But they inspire us from their enthusiasm. They just throw themselves into it. And finally I have the lady who started it all and got me involved, Kate Tuma from Singapore American School Middle School. Kate has inspired generations of students, and the principles she grounded me in when I took over are still the ones I hang on to, and that kept me fueled all this while. Now, Minister and awardees, can you just hang out a bit, because we now want to acknowledge someone who is a true force of nature. I got to build this up a bit. Yeah, she doesn't know it's going on. She's just accompanying the awardees to make them feel comfortable. Ria was honored in 2003, so can we repeat the honor? And in case you're wondering why, because RIA generates resources that are thrown up to the web. Teachers are using it, people around the world are using it. She set up web pages, but she also goes out to the field. She's leading surveys. She speaks to various groups, government and the public, and she wrestles with MPACs internally, but outside she is the fiercest defender of government agencies. And she's also out there commenting on every Facebook post, encouraging new individuals. If you write a blog post, Ria will highlight it sometimes within the hour. We don't know how she does it, so we thought I don't want to deliver a long eulogy, maybe when it's all over. So we give her the award now, and let's congratulate her once again for being so integral. Now we'd like all of them to take a photo.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Siva. So we've now come to the end of this morning's festivities. We'd like to invite our guest of honor, MOS, who's already exiting, as well as the welcome party, the speakers for today, to take a tour of the exhibits outside. The rest of you remain here, and I'll tell you what to do in just a second. And we clap. Okay, that was super fun. Now, morning tea, which is what we've all been waiting for, is being served outside. Please note that there's a table for VIPs and there's tables for the rest of you. So make sure you go to the rest of you section. In the meantime, poster presenters, don't crowd your poster yet because MOS is making its rounds, but if you want to be nearby in case he finds your poster interesting, then you can jump into action. That will be great. The next session starts at some point today. We will ring a bell and bring you back in. Okay, so thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful symposium ahead.